Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of All in All with Alex. I'm your host, of course, Alex, and today we have a very special guest, Mr. Richman Mahlangu. How you
There
doing
you
today?
go. No, I'm good, thank you. That was a good pronunciation for how my name is said in America, so we're good.
Yeah, good. So, can you give the people a brief background about yourself, and then we'll dive into the questions?
So my name is Richman Bongani Mahlangu. I was born in Durban, South Africa. Grew up during apartheid days in South Africa. I come from a family of five kids and my parents. Both of my parents did not have any formal education. And when I was 13, almost 14, my father one day was working outside and he suddenly just fell down and he ended up dying. Left my mother with five children, and I was the youngest of the five. Um, this is actually the height of the apartheid regime in South Africa. The schools I attended, we had what is called Bantu education. Bantu education was basically an inferior curriculum created specifically for black schools only. So we had four races in South Africa: whites, Indian, blacks, and coloreds. So the whites were ranked at the top, and then we had Indians, we have coloreds, and the blacks were at the bottom of the of. And just by accident, I discovered the game of tennis with two guys. There was a tennis court down the street from my house. Um, they used to come there and play. So I used to get out of the house because people were crying and mourning the death of my father. So I would go down the street and watch these guys play. One of these guys actually recruited me. His name is Benson Ndosi. He ended up recruiting me and taking me to this one other area where there was a group of black men that played tennis. There were ladies as well, but there were very, very few. They basically took the responsibility to mentor me. Apparently, this was like an ongoing and unspoken code that if they were the young black kids that came to play tennis, everybody had a responsibility to mentor them. So they started mentoring me. They would play tennis in the afternoon. They'll drive me home. When I started playing tournaments, driving me out of town, they would take me with and pay for my room and board. This is the first time where I actually ran into black men that had college education, were educated. They had their own cars. One of them was actually a guy called KKMT, and he was an attorney, which I'd never heard of an attorney, being a black kid from the township. Uh, Back in my house, I had three sisters who, and I don't know what I should always say this, unfortunately or fortunately, they all got pregnant 2, 3 months apart, and one of them had twins. So at one time in this tiny little four-room house in the township, we had 10 people. And I had to wait every night until 10 o'clock for the babies to sleep so I could do homework. I use candles for light. Toilet, the bathroom, and was outside. There was no hot running water. After discovering this game of tennis, I used to basically get out of school and go and hit against the wall at this club. And one afternoon, which was my lucky day, a white gentleman shows up coming out there to give a tennis lesson to a young lady from the township who had received some kind of a scholarship to come to America. And her father wanted her to have these tennis lessons so she could play when she got here. He sees me playing this gentleman. He comes and introduces himself. And then before he leaves, he says, you're hitting the ball pretty good for somebody who's been playing for 4 months. I'd like to give you some lessons, but you'll have to come into town, which was an hour and a half away on a bus, for me to be my ball boy, pick up balls for me, and then you'll get a half an hour lesson. So I would go and pick up balls for an hour, 2 hours, and get a half an hour lesson, and that's how my tennis career started. And then I promise I'll stop in a minute. And then 2 years later, he was going to move out of Durban and go to a place called Pietermaritzburg and open a health farm. So he said, well, I don't think you're going to get better unless you play against better players. Because at the time, we had two tennis associations in South Africa. We had one called TASA, which was Tennis Association of South Africa, composed of blacks, Indians, and coloreds. And then the other one was Tennis Association of South Africa, which was the white association. So we didn't play in white clubs. He goes to this white club called Mitchell Park, and he requests a special permission for me to play there because blacks didn't play at white clubs. So a gentleman by the name of Trevor Hall says, okay, bring this kid in. In fact, there was two of us, this Benson and I were both doing this. At some stage, Benson, he graduated and he stopped. So I go to Mitchell Park. So all of a sudden, I'm like 14 I find myself in this all-white club. I didn't know any white people socially. The only white people I knew, I'd seen, I should say, were the police in the township with guns and canine dogs and stuff. But these people were very kind, so my game gets to improve. Some of them set me up with their kids to play after school. And then one more addition to the story. Another afternoon, a guy called Richman, a South African who owned a tennis school in Austria, was on vacation, and he heard my story. I was trying to go to. So the idea of playing tennis now had become the idea of finding. This was my. I decided this was going to be my ticket to use the education and the tennis to escape the hardships of poverty, to try and come to America, because there was the only place where I'd heard of you can get an athletic scholarship. I didn't even know there was a difference between Europe, America, or where. I was just obviously totally clueless. This guy hears a story and he sponsors me. So I go and work for him in Austria, in a place called St. Wolfgang, about 45 minutes west of Salzburg. And while I work there, I'm still trying to apply to come to America. And he took a bit of advantage of me in between. He's a businessman. I got underpaid, which I didn't know at the time. But, that's how the business goes. But he was very supportive of me trying to get a scholarship to go to America. And about a year later, a guy shows up at this camp just on holiday. And I get to hit with him just for fun socially. We get done and he goes, hey, you're so young to be playing tennis, coaching tennis full time. Why don't you try and go to America, get a scholarship? And I say to him, I've been writing for the last 4 or 5 years trying to apply for scholarship, but a lot of coaches tell me, we don't know any black tennis players from South Africa. We don't know how good you are. We don't want to recruit somebody, spend so much money, and you come here and you can't even make the team. So he says, okay. He picks up the phone. We're sitting at the bar right after we got played. And I'm thinking this whole thing is a joke. He picks up the phone and he calls Las Vegas. He talks to the guy. This guy apparently had just graduated from UNLV. And he talks to the coach. He says, I just met this black kid from South Africa. He's dying to come to America. He loves tennis. He wants to study. I think if you could give him a chance, it would be a lifetime opportunity. So at some stage, I realized this is a true thing. I start to speak to this guy. I hear the American accent for the very first time. I was like 21 years old. And then I realized this is a true thing. So, but 4 weeks later, this guy sent me a letter to take to the American embassy in Vienna. I apply for the visa. I get a full ride. I come to America in 1986. I had $300 in my wallet, one bag, and 2 tennis rackets. I start to play at UNLV. 2 months later, the coach called me and said, there's a problem with your scholarship because some of the classes you took in your township, we're not sure if they qualify, for the university level, if they're equivalent to American high school. So I said, oh, okay. And then the scholarship gets taken away. So I was this close to get kicked out of the country, and he begged them, for me to give him a chance. So at that time I had no money. I ate in a dorm. I ate in the cafeteria, slept in a dorm like all the other students at university. And he allowed me to use his phone, which I didn't think was allowed. I called overseas, borrowed some money. Some couple of friends lended me money. I was able to go to school. Got done with undergraduate. My junior year, I go to Europe to work over the summer, and then I go to apply for the visa before the end of the summer, and my visa get denied. So I'm stuck in Austria after my junior year for 6 years. I had no place to live. I had no money. I was teaching about 2-3 lessons a day. I met this lady. She and I becomes close. And at some stage, we had 2 kids. If you read the book, there's more than that in the story. We have 2 kids. We ended up with 2 boys. When my younger son was 4 months, they like 22 months apart. I convinced her, said, I have to go back to America. There's no way I'm going to provide for these kids if I don't have finish my education. We come back here. The older one was 2, the younger one was 4 months. I come back to school here. I finish school. I hustle, go to graduate school, get done with graduate school, and then this is the last part of the story, I promise. I decided that I wanted to teach these boys how to play tennis as a way to find access to the best universities in America. So I became one of those fathers who pick them up every day after school, take them to tennis, train with them 2-3 hours, and then send them home, homework, dinner, bedtime. They didn't like me very much when they were 13, 14, because, in America, kids have the choice about what they want to play. I was poor and as an African man, all the kids that my sister's kids they have, their fathers did not support their kids. They were not there financially. So I wanted to make sure that I don't repeat that vicious cycle. To make the long story short, they play through juniors. They do very well. My older son got recruited, went to Harvard University, graduated in 2016 with a computer science degree. He's in San Francisco. He's a senior software engineer. Now, my younger one gets recruited to Georgetown, finishes with a sociology degree, goes and takes some finance classes, and then he started a startup of an investment company called Zulu Dreams, based on my culture, my tribe, Zulu Dream Capital LLC, and he's based in New Jersey, running his own company. I work now for the Clark County School District as a counselor in high school, and that's the short version of my story.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, though. I mean,
Thank you.
that's a lot, and I'm pretty sure you're very proud of your sons. I mean, graduating Harvard and Georgetown. I mean, those are two of the most accredited schools, in the nation. So.
Yeah, I believe it's as a growing up as a kid in the township, I just always believed it was my job to try and achieve things. I never really felt like anybody owed me something. I had to put in the work. So even the boys, when they were young, I gave them a speech the very first day we played, and I said, "We doing this so you guys have a better start in life than I did. So we're going to play tennis every day. In fact, we homeschooled for them for 1 year when I think they were second and third grade. My ex-wife and I, their mother, so I could give them, good fundamentals. But I'm very, very proud of them. We were not very close when they were 16, 17. You know what it's like that they, with you playing with your father all the time. You're around him all the time. You travel to tournaments. They never really talked a lot. When I drove to tournaments, the only thing I heard was, "Can we please stop for the bathroom or food?" And that was it. and it was painful. But I felt like it was my responsibility, to do what I needed to do. And I'm very, very proud of what they have achieved.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like all that paid off. You know what I mean? Because I mean, like you said, I mean, becoming running your own business, and then also, I mean, what you said, both of them have their own business, right?
No, I basically, I was coaching at the club here in Vegas. I was one of the pros at the club, so I designated a certain time for them. I paid membership at the club to be able to have access to the courts. So I would train with them and then go and teach some of the lessons afterwards. And then their mother would pick them up when they were done, and I'll teach till 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. But I don't have a private business. I felt like the best way for me to have stability was to persuade my education. So I got a master's degree in educational psychology, which allowed me to be a counselor. And for them, they don't need a master's degree because they went to these good schools and got a good education. So their life is good, fortunately.
So what inspired you to write your biography, Zulu Dreams?
So Zulu Dreams, from apartheid to the Ivy League. I actually started writing this book right after I left South Africa, coming to America. I actually hand wrote everything about 15 years, and then I had, because I'm illiterate, computer illiterate, so I had to go get people to type it afterwards. But the idea right from the beginning was to find a way to share my story, to find a way to empower young people, but specifically low income kids, to realize or to believe and realize that regardless of where they come from, there is a path to accomplishing their own success if they commit to education, find something they like, work hard at it, and not get caught up in so much of our horrible history that has happened. Whether when I first came to America, I didn't know anything about the history of slavery, because the education that I had, we never taught anything about that. I only learned about that when I go to Europe. I didn't know anything about the history of the Jewish community with Adolf Hitler. I learned that when I go to Europe. I had never even seen what Mandela looked like, because in South Africa he was banned, his name or his pictures. So my idea was always zoned in trying to find a way to empower kids. And then when I came to America and started working in the school system, I realized that the same cycle of poverty is exactly the same as in South Africa or anywhere you go where we have low income people who are poor. Some of them are trapped by repercussions of the history. So Zulu Dreams was obviously to share a bit of my story, my culture of the African people. It's actually just been recently edited, got finished 2 weeks ago. I did some proofreading, but it's been edited. It's going to be republished. But the old version is still available on Amazon. But that was the main reason of writing the story, is to empower kids, especially because I'm in education. My day shines when I see kids being successful academically, whether it's sport, whatever they're doing, lifting themselves up on their situation to live better lives.
So how do you balance your role as a school counselor, tennis coach, and an author?
I never even thought about it, that there was actually an issue. I just, when you're growing up poor, what ends up happening, especially when you come to a foreign country with two young babies and a wife. So my wife in the beginning here, my ex-wife, I should say, she couldn't work in America because at some stage I had a work permit. And so she took care of the boys because she's actually from Austria. So she couldn't work for a long time until we had the green card. So I had a very I didn't get a lot of sleep because I was going to school, I was working, and then sometimes I went to grad school, and then I would be teaching. So at some stage I started working two jobs. I was working at a school in the afternoon, still teaching lessons. I would train with the boys, and on the weekend I would travel, and then I would do the writing in between. So the writing was interesting because a lot of things, they were just happening, and I would write them as they were happening. I never really thought about it in a sense that it was kind of like a responsibility of juggling. It was just something that I felt like I was in the position to do. But another motivating thing is that, as a foreigner, when you come to America, it's absolutely amazing the opportunities that one has in America. That when you come from a country like me, South Africa, from poverty with limited resources. So when you come to America, there's a park there where you can go and play for 3 hours without anybody bothering you. It's like, wow, I could go to the library and check out books. In South Africa, in my school, the schools I went to, there were no libraries, there was no labs. So the opportunities, I was so motivated by the opportunities that exist in America at the time, but also I just always felt that I could do better in life. So I knew that I had to go and get a master's degree at some stage because I would be more marketable, I'd be more employable. So that was basically my motivation. But I think the most number one motivation for me was my boys. I was terrified of having my kids who are considered, so my kids are mixed, but they're considered black in America. I was terrified to having my boys, black kids in America, who did not have an education. I'm talking about higher education, to go to a university or have some kind of trade where they could stand on their own. So that was the most terrifying thing for me. That motivated me beyond anything I could possibly imagine. So I basically dedicated every single energy that I had to their lives to make sure that because I kind of had a good feeling that if they could can get good at tennis and they had interest in school, they do well in school, they should be able to get into good schools. And fortunately, that worked for my family, changing our family tree from the township, to the Ivy League in one generation. So I'm so grateful for that.
Definitely, that's an amazing story, and to be able to, like you said, I mean, change, literally change your life from nothing to, you know, way more than you could ever imagine. Is definitely a big deal. So,
Thank you.
um, can you share a success story from your work with the Richmond Foundation?
So I have a small foundation here called Richman Mahlangu Foundation. It's a nonprofit. I started this a couple of years back. The idea behind it is to empower kids. So what I've done until now, a lot of students that graduate in my school. So in my school, it's a Title One school where we have mostly low income kids, a lot of Hispanic students and black kids, and we also have a smaller population of white students and Asian students. So what I do basically is the kids that like school, that do well behaved, I say to them, I give them a copy of the book, Success Beyond Expectations, which is the smaller version of, it's a self-help book, I should say, from the autobiography. I say, go read this book and then come back and tell me what you think about it. Write me, you know, a statement and tell me whether you like the book. What did you learn? And then they read it. A lot of them don't read. Sometimes they come back to me. I'm like, okay, great. So when you go to college, you have a choice. I can pay for your first semester of books. Um, first semester of your books at university, or I can buy you an iPad. We have a town square here with Apple. So most of them actually they've got an iPad. There's some of them that wanted to go and look at the university. They didn't have any traveling money, so I paid for that. One young lady a couple of years back wanted to go to the West Point in New York to tour the facility, wanted to go to the military. I paid for their trip. And then sometimes I go about and donating, but it's a little tricky to go and do fundraising when you have a full-time job. At the moment, so I went to South Africa over the summer on a book tour. And one of the things that came out of that is I'm actually starting a nonprofit in South Africa. Again, the concept on that one more is to have after school curriculum like tutoring for kids, math and science, pay for the teachers to tutor them, and because I would like the kids to be more involved in making choices about getting into computer science, engineering, architecture, which is very, very scarce in our low income areas because the kids we struggle with math. So that's number one priority. The second priority is the tennis. Tennis is dying in South Africa. And I want to try to revive tennis in South Africa. So I want to, my township where I grew up, the tennis court where I grew up is no longer in existence, but there is the dirt, the area where it was. So I'm going to be doing fundraising to actually build tennis courts in the rural areas and in the townships. So those are the two focuses with that foundation is building courts. I've a couple of former tennis players, South Africans who were top 10 in the world in tennis, who are retired now. They're part of my foundation. And some of the coaches, college coaches that are going to be involved, that the foundation is going to be bringing them to South Africa to come to the townships and coach the kids, and then pay for some of them to come to universities. To play international tournaments, which we call ITF in America and Europe, and then go to tennis camps over the summer when they're not in school. Those that get good enough, again, the idea is to develop that pipeline between high schools and universities where they can use their athletic ability and their academic ability to go to universities, and also use the universities in Europe for scholarships. That's the idea behind my foundations that I'm trying to build, basically.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about what your goal was for your book, Success Beyond Expectations?
Success Beyond Expectation is a self-help book. It's got also inspirational. It's got 9 steps that I believe were the reason why my story was successful. So, for example, I share a bit of my story, and then I use the examples of the story, how these steps applied. So, for example, the step number 1 is believe in yourself. You know that when you wake up in the morning and you look into the mirror, the person you see in front of you, you got to believe that this person can achieve great things in life, that you should not rely on what people tell you about whether you're going to be good or not, but you basically, it's your responsibility, it's up to you. And at the same time, realize that there's going to be difficult things that you're going to struggle with. One of the steps is failure, realizing that failure is not the end of the world. In fact, I see failure as quite actually a good thing, because it gives us an opportunity to reflect and see what we did wrong. I have failed so many times in my life, but I just never stopped. So one of the examples was, after I finished graduate school, you have 3 years to pass this test called the practice in America. Actually, I should say in Nevada, to get the permanent license. So for the first 3 years, you get a partial license, and once you pass this test, and then you get this permanent license. I couldn't pass this test I missed it, I think, about 9 times, because English is not my first language. So my reading and comprehension when I'm taking tests under pressure, I read very slow, so I would not finish the test. So I failed this test. Eventually, they fired me. I lost my job. Went back and studied for 2-3 years. Eventually, I passed it. Applied back to CCSD. Didn't get hired for 5 years, but eventually I got rehired again. I regained my position. That's one of the steps. One of the steps is resiliency, which is basically, for us to be successful, you need that thick skin. So when you're struggling, it doesn't mean you're failing, but the thick skin, you cannot be successful if you fail one time and then you quit because you're afraid you're going to fail again. So there is a resiliency, there is commitment. One of the things that has worked for me as well is this commitment. This Tim Gray gentleman, a white gentleman who gave me this lesson, said, if you come to the city for and do ball boying for me, I'll give you half an hour lesson for you to do the 2 hours of being my ball boy. I did that for 2 years without missing one day unless it was raining. So commitment is one of the really important steps among these steps. Um, so it's based on 9 steps that people, of course, they don't use all of them, but these are the steps that most successful people have done. And my kids have actually gone through the same kind of thing because we're using the same model for them to achieve what they achieve. One of the steps is for people trying to go to college. It's very, very difficult to figure out what you want to do because a lot of time our students, they make a decision. I want to study accounting. They get into university and realize accounting is a lot of sitting in an office all alone crunching numbers, and they realize they don't want to do that. I think that's actually a good thing because they need to explore. But 2 years later, they change their major to to go to something else. So the idea, if you look at the research in America, most people change their major 2 to 3 times sometimes before they graduate. I think it's a good thing because so often we kind of pigeonhole the kids. We want them to get in and start this thing and be done. And if they exploring and struggle a little bit, we start to call them like failures. So a lot of times they get into a major they don't like because either their parents are paying, and obviously they have to follow what their parents say to them because otherwise they don't have the money. But I think kids need to be allowed to experiment and learn and develop all these skills. Mark Zuckerberg did the same thing at Harvard. I mean, he was in computer science, but he didn't even graduate because he finds something that he was exploring with Facebook. So as Bill Gates and a lot of other people. And my son was fortunate to go to that program. He started with economics and then he changed into computer science. So it's based on these 9 steps, and I think if they use some of these steps, there is no way that they will not be successful because this is all based on how much they're willing to apply this stuff. It's nobody forcing them to do anything. It's the choices that they get to make. So the book basically it tells my story of growing up, struggles that I've had, how I was able to overcome them. There's a good number of racial stories that had happened being a black person. When I was 16 years old, I mentioned earlier we had this tennis association of blacks, Indian, and coloreds, and the Indians and coloreds were ranked better than the blacks. When I was 16, I met this colored girl from Cape Town that she and I we had this teenage crush. We started talking to each other, writing letters, and making phone calls. One night I get a phone call. We had a phone then at my house when I was 16. That's when we got a phone in my house. I got a phone call from her dad saying, this is Renee's father. You should never ever call my daughter again. She's got better things to do. If you want a girlfriend, you should look in the people of your own. And 2 weeks later, I get a letter from the mom who had written these most horrible names, calling me all this type of name. She took a picture that I'd sent to her and cut into little pieces, put it into this envelope, and mailed it back to me. So there's examples of those racism that in fact, somehow as an older man now, I kind of want to thank this woman because she exposed me to real life situations where I had to deal with this adversity of racism. It wasn't fun at the time, but you cannot be successful when you're going to allow people to say these negative things and then you feel bad and you put it down. So this was actually motivating for me. So this is what these steps are based on in real life situations, some of the good ones as well. Like one of the guys in Vegas, a guy called Mason Melmoth, he saw me train with my boys every day. He was a member at this club, and he had a non-profit foundation. He write gambling books, and he had a non-profit. So at some stage, he made a good amount of money, and he approached me and he said, I'd like to help you because I see you doing a lot of hard work with the boys, and this is for education. He sponsored my kids every year a good amount of money for 5 years to pay for college expenses and all this stuff. So this is based on real life story of hard work and failure and all the stuff, but also that there's a lot of good people out there that if you're trying, people don't want to help people who are not helping themselves. People want to help people who are helping themselves. So that's another message that I share with the kids in the story or with people in the story.
Yeah, no, that's a fact though. People, if they see you're wanting to be successful, you're wanting to do the right things, you're you're making the right decisions to try to better yourself, they'll help you more than likely.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what advice do you have for young people facing adversity and seeking success?
Yeah, a lot of it obviously is based on my personal experience, but I've been fortunate. I grew up in Africa, or South Africa, I should say. I had a chance to live in Europe. In Europe, where I lived, there were no black people in the 80s. I was the only black person in the city. In the camp where I worked, we had 30 people a week. There were Austrians, Germans, and Swiss people, which the language had to be used to teach is in German. So I had to learn how to speak German. And then, of course, I came to America. I think it's hard very often for our young people if they stuck in a ghetto, in a sense that if they don't have role models. Most of the people that I've gotten to know, a lot of white friends that I've had, most of their parents, they professionals. They had college degrees. They could run their own businesses. They know they're going to go to college. My parents couldn't read and write. I never saw anybody read in my house, totally illiterate. But somehow I had this drive that I wanted to be successful. So it sounds unfair sometimes, and I say to the kids, as difficult as you things, as difficult as you see or you think things are, this is actually real normal life. You don't see yourself as a victim, because you're not a victim. Basically, there's been people who've been slaves in the world since the world started. Women have been disadvantaged since the world started in almost every culture, but they're flocking in universities, they're running companies now. It is up to you, regardless where you come from, to go out there. But most importantly, as far as I know, in this country, in America, education through high school is free. So whether you think the school is in the ghetto is not the best education you can get, partially I disagree, because it's education. You can use that education. There is scholarships for different things. There is local universities. So for example, in Vegas, we have our community university where kids can come and study for 3 years for free. They don't really have a specific GPA. The scholarship is called Nevada Promise. They don't have to have a specific GPA. They don't have to have anything to qualify. As long as they graduate and apply, they can go to a community service and study. So the best way to escape poverty, the first thing you have to do is to do your basic education. You want to go to school, even if it's hard, that's fine. Struggle through it. I never had straight A's in school. I've always struggled. And again, I shared the story of failing. I failed in some classes in college. I would take them over summer school to be able to catch up. But I just always believe it was the path for me to success. The idea of working hard is very few people get successful doing less. Most people are successful, they work hard, they don't get a lot of sleep. And then at some stage, when they've made the money, they go to people who work for them, and then they don't work as hard. But the idea is to believe in themselves, commit to higher education, work hard, finish high school no matter what you do. And you don't necessarily have to go to college. You can go to trade school, you can be an electrician, you can be a plumber, you can do woodwork. Those are a lot of high paying jobs, but a lot of times people don't want to do this job because it's a lot of physical work. Because university is not for everybody. And university in America is extremely, extremely expensive. People sometimes they bury themselves into debt, and then it takes them 15, 20 years to be able to pay those debts. A lot of people don't want to do it, and I don't blame them. But I think the path to success is education, and this idea of working on yourself. Find a way to stay away from the bad influence of, if your friends start drinking and smoking and doing all these unproductive things. This is the time to, you can be friends with them, but you don't have to hang out with them when they do these things, or you don't have to do them to try and fit in. I've never had, and I'm not saying that I'm a better person, I've never tried to smoke a cigarette. I'm 60. I've never smoked once. I've never had a drop of alcohol. I never had sex until I was 21, because I was afraid to make a girl pregnant, since I'd seen what happened with my sister. And I don't think that, I mean, I know I'm very squarely in that sense, but I don't think my life is miserable because I've never had a drink. Most of my friends drink. I never saw anything productive about it. So I do think you can find your own path without trying to fit in into a group. And I'm obviously not going to do unproductive things to make other people happy when I'm not unhappy. But I do understand the peer pressure. I get it. I work in high school. I see it every day. It's not an easy thing because people want to be accepted. They want to be part of the group to fit in. So in my sense, it's kind of very dry. My kids went through it. We got done with school. We went home, did homework, ate dinner, went to work, went to sleep, and woke up the next day and did the same thing for the whole high school thing. And today, these are the results. I don't have to explain. It's right. It's right where it is.
You know, it's some people just don't understand certain things though. But can you let's see, let's do this. Can you discuss the significance of your work with the African National Congress and other organizations?
So, in the last couple of years, I must say that I should probably take that out of my resume. The reason I'm saying that is that I am not politically active because I don't know a lot about politics.
I wouldn't say that you ain't smart enough. You just ain't done the research. That's all. That's all. That's all. So, with everything that you have going on, how can the audience, the listeners, how can they get involved in supporting your initiatives and empowering and helping you empower young people? Okay, so um, do you have anything that you would like to share with the audience, or to let them know, like if you have any new books coming out, anything before we get up out here? I agree. I agree. Make sure you put plans to those dreams though, so they won't become a pipe dream. Right. I agree. I agree. So I want to take this time out to tell you that I really appreciate you coming on today, telling your story, talking about your amazing books that you have, and just letting the audience know, how they can overcome adversity. So I definitely want to thank you for that. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. No problem. Thank you. So everybody that's out there watching, you guys go to ZuluDreams.com. You guys go support Richmond and everything that he has going on. Go donate to his nonprofit. Go buy his books. Just follow his journey and support him as much as possible. Um, but you guys have just watched another episode of All in All with Alex, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Peace.